Welcome to the debate. Usually when a massive enterprise buys new software, it is fundamentally like upgrading the engine on a battleship.
Right?
You carefully plan the installation, you swap out the old parts for the new, you measure the increased speed.
But you keep sailing across the exact same ocean.
Exactly. The structures, the crew, the destination, they all remain entirely intact. But with the rollout of generative AI over the last few years, that battleship metaphor completely sinks.
Yeah, because the organizations acquiring these tools are suddenly realizing they aren't just dealing with a faster engine.
No.
They are dealing with an entirely new method of navigation.
Precisely. To extract real value from generative AI, companies are finding they practically have to tear down and rebuild the ship while it is already at sea.
Oh man, yeah.
So today we are looking at the organizational journey of enterprise generative AI deployment. Specifically, we are focusing on the massive gap between simply giving employees access to a chatbot and actually generating sustainable business impact.
And it is a fascinating gap to explore because the way this technology actually bled into the workplace has been entirely backward compared to how traditional enterprise software usually works.
Totally backward. Our discussion today is grounded in the contemporary research from Jonathan H. Westover's comprehensive study.
Right, from access to impact.
Yes, from access to impact, understanding the organizational journey of enterprise AI deployment. And this research is an absolute goldmine. It analyzes ChatGPT enterprise usage data from over 1,500 organizations.
It's a huge data set.
It is. It comprises more than 17 million messages spanning from January 2024 through March 2026.
Wow.
Yeah. And my stance today is that translating AI access into actual measurable value demands a highly deliberate top-down approach. You cannot just hand people the technology.
You think they need structure?
I think it requires massive complementary investments in organizational capability, strict structural governance, and fundamental process redesign. You really must systematically engineer it into the operational fabric.
Well, I come at it from a different way.
Okay.
I will be arguing that generative AI represents a fundamentally different paradigm. Its true transformative power doesn't come from the boardroom.
Where does it come from then?
It is driven by decentralized bottom-up worker-led experimentation. When you rely on rigid top-down centralized IT structures to dictate how AI is used, you don't create value.
I completely disagree, but go on.
You actively impede the natural organic diffusion of the technology across all the hyper-specific tasks that employees actually do every day.
Well, let's start with the economic reality of what we are dealing with here. Generative AI is not a plug-and-play tool like an email client.
Sure.
It is what economists call a general-purpose technology, much like the introduction of electricity or the internet.
Right. It changes everything.
Yes, and the history of general-purpose technologies shows us that the most transformative innovations require organizations to do significantly more than just buy the infrastructure.
Okay.
They demand massive intangible investments.
By intangible, you mean things that don't show up on a balance sheet like a physical factory does.
Exactly. You have to redesign your business processes. You have to create entirely new organizational routines, and you have to dedicate serious, painful amounts of time to workforce training.
Which is hard to measure.
Very hard. This is why we are currently seeing what economists call a productivity J-curve. If you imagine a letter J, productivity actually drops or stagnates at first.
That's the dip.
That's the dip, yeah, because everyone is fumbling through the friction of learning the new system. It takes time before it eventually shoots upward. But the Boston Consulting Group study from 2025 makes the stakes of getting through that dip abundantly clear.
Right, the revenue numbers.
Yeah. AI leaders are achieving 1.7 times the revenue growth and 1.6 times higher EBIT margins.
Meaning their core operating profitability.
Right, compared to laggards.
But how are they achieving that? What are they actually doing differently?
Well, the organizations winning this race are strictly adhering to what is known as the 1-3-5 formula.
Okay, break that down.
So for every $1 they invest in the raw technology or the software licenses, they invest $3 in redesigning their processes,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and $5 in capability building and change management. They aren't just crossing their fingers and hoping employees figure out how to be productive.
They're forcing it.
They are systematically engineering that value from the top down.
Well, that sounds incredibly neat and organized on paper, but we have to recognize that generative AI entered the enterprise through a highly unusual, virtually unprecedented path.
How so?
It was a consumer-to-enterprise diffusion, long before corporate IT departments had established formal governance frameworks or AI oversight committees or, 135 formulas.
Yeah.
Individual workers were already using these tools on their personal devices to solve their own daily bottlenecks.
Oh, absolutely.
They experimented at home and quietly brought those solutions to the office.
Shadow IT, basically.
Exactly, but incredibly productive shadow IT. True AI integration is organic. It is highly role-specific.
Meaning what exactly?
Think about it. A financial analyst uses AI completely differently than a graphic designer or an HR manager. It is driven by individual task experimentation, not by sweeping corporate mandates.
Okay.
When you try to over-engineer AI deployment through traditional centralized IT procurement models, your battleship engine approach, you stifle what we call the long tail of diverse applications.
Define how you're using long tail here for our listeners.
Yeah, so the long tail refers to the thousands of highly specific niche tasks that make up a company's daily operations. Management doesn't even know half of these microtasks exist.
That's probably true, yeah.
Maybe it's a specific way an operations clerk reconciles two incredibly messy spreadsheets every Tuesday. Top-down mandates simply cannot predict or prescribe the millions of micro-efficiencies that workers discover on their own.
Sure.
When you just give them the tool and let them play, that grassroots discovery process is where the technology's true power lies.
Look, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective based directly on the firm-level data from the source material.
Okay, let's hear it.
If this were truly just about grassroots, bottom-up diffusion naturally taking over the workplace, we would expect to see successful adoption uniformly across all types and sizes of businesses.
But we don't?
No. The data explicitly shows we don't.
You're referring to the concentration of early adopters?
Yes. The data shows a massive gap. The companies adopting this early aren't small, agile startups.
Right.
They are massive incumbents. I mean, if you look at the public companies adopting ChatGPT Enterprise between 2024 and 2026, the median revenue for adopters is $2.3 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, compared to just $210 million for non-adopters. It is an order of magnitude difference.
But it's not just their financial scale, right? It's their pre-existing infrastructure.
Exactly. The data pointed to their prior SG&A spending.
Which is what? Selling general and administrative expenses?
Right, which is really just the financial term for a company's overhead, their knowledge workers, their back office systems. The successful firms had massive prior stocks of this, as well as huge R&D investments dating back to 2021.
Long before this generative AI wave even began.
Long before. To return to our metaphor, these traditional firms are like battleships trying to navigate a digital canal. They desperately need the pre-existing knowledge management infrastructure,
Okay.
the structural flexibility, and the centralized processes to extract value from AI. You need that massive, centralized, top-down foundation first, otherwise the AI has nothing to anchor to.
Wait. That seems completely counterintuitive to me.
Why?
If the massive companies have the huge R&D budgets to buy the software, why wouldn't they be the ones integrating it the fastest?
Because that is not what the data shows.
What do you mean? That's exactly what it shows.
No, yes, large firms with massive revenues are the ones buying the enterprise software. They have the capital and the organizational slack to make the procurement.
Right.
But the crucial nuance is how the data behaves after the initial purchase.
Okay.
Conditional on actually adopting the tool, there is a distinct inverse relationship between firm size and usage intensity.
Oh, you're talking about the token generation metrics.
Exactly. Once the tool is actually inside the building, the mid-sized firms have significantly higher weekly active users.
And they produce far more output tokens, meaning the actual volume of text, code, or data the AI is spitting back out for the employees.
Right.
They produce way more than the $2.3 billion behemoths. If top-down, Massive organizational infrastructure was the true key to integration. The largest firms would logically be the most intense users.
Well, but you're assuming raw usage equates to effective integration.
I'm arguing that massive corporate scale actually creates coordination barriers. I mean, if you're listening to this and you work in a massive enterprise, you know exactly what I mean.
The bureaucracy.
Yes, the bureaucracy, the endless layers of approval, the rigid central planning, it all slows down real practical integration. The mid-sized firms win on intensity precisely because they are closer to the grassroots level.
Okay, but
They can let their employees experiment without navigating endless red tape. Size gets you the expensive enterprise license, but agility and organic adoption gets you the actual daily usage.
that's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. High usage intensity, generating millions of tokens and sending thousands of messages, is completely chaotic noise.
Noise?
Yeah, and fundamentally useless if it isn't structurally integrated into the firm's central nervous system. You cannot just let employees run wild with external tools and hope it magically improves the bottom line.
Well, it doesn't happen magically. It happens through workflow discovery.
But the AI needs data to do the work. Let's look at the global pharmaceutical company detailed in the research.
Okay.
They ran early pilots of ChatGPT Enterprise within their research teams. They relied on exactly the organic grassroots enthusiasm you're advocating for.
And what happened?
The result was completely limited adoption and massive internal frustration.
Because the researchers were hitting a wall.
Exactly. Why did they hit a wall? Because the AI could not access the internal proprietary compound libraries.
Right?
It couldn't see the historical clinical trial data. It couldn't read the regulatory submission histories. It was just a highly articulate, very smart chatbot sitting outside the corporate firewall.
Which isn't very helpful for a pharma researcher.
Right. If a researcher asked it a highly specific internal question, it would hallucinate or apologize. It required 6 months of intensive top-down work.
6 months? Wow.
Yeah, IT, legal, and data governance teams had to painstakingly connect the AI interfaces to curated, permissioned internal data sources. Only after that massive, unglamorous, centralized infrastructure investment did usage increase 5-fold.
Okay, so it unlocked the tool, basically.
Only then could researchers apply it to actual literature reviews and regulatory document preparation. Without centralized infrastructure organizing the data, organic experimentation hits a brick wall.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that that's the only way it works. Let me tell you why, using Anthropic's own internal deployment data from the research.
Anthropic, right.
Anthropic is literally a company building these models. They represent the absolute bleeding edge of how to integrate AI.
Sure.
When they deploy their tools internally to their own staff, they deliberately did not mandate a top-down structural use case.
Really?
Yes. Initially, because they are fundamentally an engineering company, usage concentrated heavily on code generation. But because they allowed organic experimentation without rigid governance prescribing exact workflows, a fascinating shift happened.
You're talking about the shift toward operations.
Yes. Researchers spontaneously started using it for literature synthesis and hypothesis generation. But more importantly, the operations team started mapping complex, previously unspoken workflows.
Interesting.
The legal team built their own AI-assisted contract review system. This highlights the massive divergence between task reach and task depth.
Right.
Workers will broadly experiment across hundreds of tasks, that long tail of applications we discussed. If management steps in on day one and says, we have integrated this specifically for coding, here is the approved workflow. Please only use it for coding.
They kill the discovery.
They completely cut off the grassroots discovery process that led the operations and legal teams to transform their own departments.
I mean, I am absolutely not arguing for management to prescribe narrow, hyper-specific use cases. Governance does not mean prohibition. It means scaffolding.
But scaffolding can quickly become a cage in a corporate environment.
Well, not if it's built correctly. I mean, when we look at Microsoft 365 Copilot deployments, they invested heavily in governance tooling before turning it on for everyone.
Right.
They set strict guardrails around data access. They monitored usage for anomalies, and they established approval workflows for highly sensitive areas.
That scaffolding actually makes experimentation safer and counterintuitively faster.
Faster how?
Because employees report higher confidence. They aren't terrified of accidentally leaking proprietary company data to a public model or violating some obscure compliance standard.
Okay, I see that.
You need that structural safety net to enable the very experimentation you are praising.
But look at who is actually doing the experimenting and driving the value. If top-down management and executive process redesign were the true drivers of this revolution, we would see leaders and managers utilizing these tools to execute their grand strategies.
Okay.
But the data shows a stark seniority gradient.
You mean the usage breakdown by title?
Right. When you look at the 17 million messages analyzed, early career workers and trainees are sending 8 to 9 more weekly messages than the average active user within their firm.
That is a big gap.
It is. Meanwhile, the executives, founders, partners, and senior managers send notably fewer messages. Think about the human element here. Why are the most junior workers the most intense users?
Probably because they have the most repetitive tasks.
Exactly. They are the ones facing the steepest learning curves. They are battling imposter syndrome. They are saddled with the heavy, repetitive data processing grunt work that AI excels at eliminating.
Sure.
This proves that value is being built from the bottom up by the workforce on the ground. AI literacy isn't trickling down from the C-suite, it is bubbling upward. The top-down management is actually lagging significantly behind the daily reality of their own junior workforce.
I'm not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning because you are fundamentally conflating activity with impact.
Am I?
Yes. Message volume does not equal organizational value. A junior worker sending 8 extra messages a week to generate boilerplate text is just raw activity. It only becomes valuable if management steps in to completely redesign the workflows surrounding that junior worker.
How so? I mean, if a junior employee is getting their daily tasks done twice as fast, that is inherent value to the company. They are producing more output per hour.
Not necessarily. In a vacuum, yes, but no employee works in a vacuum. Let's dig into Stripe's internal deployment of AI-assisted code generation.
Okay, Stripe is a great example.
Yes, the junior developers were suddenly able to write boilerplate code much, much faster using the AI. But what happens when you do that without changing the system? You just create a massive traffic jam at the code review stage.
Oh, I see.
The individual productivity gain of the junior developer is completely isolated, and it is largely lost to organizational friction because the senior developers still have to manually read and review 5 times as much code.
So the bottleneck just shifted further down the line.
Exactly. The junior worker clicking generate isn't the value. What Stripe did to actually realize the value was fundamentally re-architect the entire pipeline.
From the top down.
From the top down. Management changed how product managers drafted specifications, knowing the AI could easily translate them into code scaffolding.
Right.
They redesigned the code review processes themselves, perhaps including automated testing specifically tuned for AI-generated patterns. They actively paired junior developers with senior oversight on more ambitious features rather than just having them write boilerplate.
Okay.
You have to change how the work is reviewed and processed to absorb and monetize that new speed.
That's a compelling argument. And I agree that workflow redesign is necessary eventually. But my point is, you can't design the new workflow until the junior workers figure out what the tool can actually do. Management wouldn't have known there was a traffic jam at the code review stage unless the grassroots activity happened first.
But simply tracking that grassroots activity is a trap if it isn't aggressively managed toward a business outcome. Let's look at the healthcare organization detailed in the 2025 research.
Oh, the note-taking one.
Yes. They were initially tracking activity metrics and seeing that 70% of their physicians were using the tool, averaging 25 messages a week.
Which sounds great.
That is a fantastic grassroots metric. The doctors are using it. But it meant absolutely nothing to the hospital's bottom line until they tracked the outcome metrics.
Right, the actual drop in encounter note time.
Precisely. The time it took a physician to write a patient encounter note dropped from 12 minutes down to 7 minutes. The completeness of those notes actually rose to 91%, and their billing compliance flags dropped by 40% because the AI was catching errors.
That's massive.
It is, but here is the critical piece. Physicians reported having 90 additional minutes per week freed up.
Wow.
Manager fluency is absolutely required to capture that newly freed up time and reallocate it to direct patient care or higher value tasks.
Right, because otherwise they just go home early.
Exactly. If a junior worker or a doctor saves 2 hours a day, but management hasn't redesigned the day to utilize those 2 hours, the company gains nothing. The worker just has an easier afternoon.
Well, that is a very fair critique of purely tracking token counts or message volume. But let's look closely at how that manager's fluency is actually developed in reality.
Okay.
You argue for top-down capability building, which usually translates to a massive, boring corporate training seminar.
Not necessarily.
But the research explicitly shows that generic AI awareness sessions are highly ineffective. The organizations that actually succeed are utilizing distributed leadership.
Give me an example of that.
Look at Salesforce. They use their Trailblazer community model. Instead of IT handing down a manual, power users on the ground, the junior and mid-level employees who actually figured out the specific workflows, they train their peers.
Right.
They maintain team-specific prompt libraries, and they troubleshoot in local Slack channels. The centralized IT help desk approach fails because IT doesn't understand the nuance of how a specific marketing team routes a campaign.
Well, sure.
It is the grassroots community that sustains engagement and overcomes adoption barriers, not a top-down training module.
Which brings us precisely back to the 1-3-5 formula. I think we are violently agreeing here, just using different terminology.
You think so?
Yes, those peer-to-peer networks, those specific role-based training modules, those quarterly capability assessments where learning teams refine training based on self-reported friction.
Right.
That is exactly what the 5 represents. 5 parts investment in capability building and change management for every 1 part spent on the software. It is a highly deliberate structured strategy, even if it employs peer-to-peer tactics on the ground.
I see what you're saying.
It is the complete antithesis of just throwing the software over the wall and hoping the grassroots figures it out organically. The evidence from this massive data set clearly indicates that AI is an investable asset requiring deliberate redesign of human systems to pull a company out of the J-curve dip.
And while I acknowledge the absolute necessity of eventual workflow integration, I maintain that if you over-index on process redesign and rigid governance too early, you crush the very experimentation that identifies the value in the first place.
You need a balance.
You must protect the decentralized, worker-led nature of generative AI. The long tail of opportunistic creative task applications is where the true potential lies, and you cannot mandate creativity from the top down.
Well, it seems we are arriving at a clear point of convergence regarding the current state of enterprise AI.
I think so.
Looking at the data from early 2026, it is overwhelmingly evident that the enterprise landscape is firmly entrenched in the investment phase of that productivity J-curve.
Definitely.
The massive process restructuring, the intense data integration connecting AI to internal systems, and the capability building we've discussed are currently depressing immediate measurable productivity across many sectors.
Absolutely. We are in the building phase. It's messy, it's expensive, and it takes time. I think both sides of this debate can agree that merely tracking activity metrics like weekly active users or output token counts is a fundamentally insufficient way to measure true organizational transformation.
Yes.
You have to connect the usage to tangible business outcomes, whether that's faster deal velocity in a sales department or better diagnostic completeness in a hospital.
As we conclude, it leaves us with a critical question, and I encourage everyone listening to examine their own workplace with this in mind. When your company deploys these tools, are they just dropping a new engine into an old battleship and expecting the crew to somehow figure out how to sail faster?
Right.
Or are they deliberately redesigning the ship, retraining the crew, and changing the very way you navigate to survive an entirely new kind of ocean?
It is the defining question every leadership team needs to be asking themselves right now, because the ocean has definitely changed.
Thank you for joining us for The Debate.